came across this thing called CBD. I said, what is this? I tried it and immediately I had the same results. Like my anxiety melted away. It was like this wave of calm came over me. My tics went away. I felt more normal, but I didn't have to smoke. I didn't have to deal with intoxicating effects. I didn't have to deal with the consistency issues from wherever I was getting my cannabis, right? It was a
Right.
more
Yeah.
medicinal, health focused approach. And CBD, it gives you all of those same I call it nature's most powerful anti-inflammatory. So it immediately went to work on the inflammation in my brain and in my body without all those negative connotations of cannabis.
Welcome to Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. I'm Brigitte Shipman. I'm your host. And today I'm excited to have Ethan Pompeo. Today he is going to talk about his incredible story of turning adversity into opportunity. He was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Pandas as a kid. And now his company is transforming the health and lives of others with simple, effective wellness solutions for the whole family. So, welcome to Mother's Guide, Ethan.
Oh, thank you so much.
I know that as a parent myself, we're always looking for answers for something to try just to see if it relates to our child. Because as we know, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one. So sometimes it's referred to as pandas. So, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story? Because I think folks are going to want to hear from you. And then we'll get into what pandas is and how you can help us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a parent as well. I actually have four daughters, which people are always surprised when I say that because I've got a young face. But my wife and I come from a family of six. I have two brothers and a sister. So I come from a family with four kids. It's not a big change for me, but we love having them around. It's just such a joy. And to be able to pour into their lives is something super special. I was normal and quote unquote normal and healthy as a young adult or as a child. And then around the age of 13, I started to have these neurological symptoms, loss of motor function, tics, compulsions, compulsive movements, OCD, severe anxiety, and a whole host of associated symptoms. And for a long time, we didn't know what was going on. It took almost a decade for me to actually get that pandas diagnosis and kind of point me in the right direction in terms of how to heal. But for a long time, we didn't know what was wrong. And it was very isolating and honestly a depressing place to be for me and my parents as we searched for solutions.
How old were you at that time?
So I was 13 when my symptoms first started, and it came out of the blue. Quite honestly, I was fine and normal one day, and then the next day I wake up and I have this skip step where I have to like tap my right foot twice when I'm walking, and it started to disrupt my day-to-day movements. And from there, the symptoms just cascaded into effectively interfering with every part of my life. For example, from my phone or a pencil or my toothbrush, I had to pick it up and toss it in my hand and catch it and until it felt just right, which is a hard concept to understand. But if it didn't feel just right, I had to put it down, pick it up, toss it again over and over until that tick manifested the anxiety that I was feeling around that. It's a very unusual behavior. I sometimes exhibited the classic Tourette syndrome response of just getting very frustrated with this and lashing out with verbal tics and even profanities. And so that was my original diagnosis. When we first went to my pediatrician, he referred us to a neurologist who said, yeah, you've got Tourette's. And essentially, it was a label that was given to me. We didn't know what caused it. We didn't know how to cure it or really even treat it. And so by the time I was 17, I had been on over 40 different prescription medications, just trying to find something that would help. And of course, none of them helped, which is why we kept trying different things. The side effects often outweighed the benefits, and I was left back at square one.
Yeah, that sounds like a horrible journey to be on. And the fact that you were so aware and you actually sound like you suffered quite a bit.
Yeah. I joke that I'm quite good at drywall repair because of all the holes I put in the wall of my bedroom, especially as a young teenager dealing with this on top of all the other things that normal kids deal with. It was quite frustrating.
Yeah, I can't imagine, honestly. Our listeners, I think most of the autism community is pretty aware of pandas, but we're always learning, and there'll
Yeah.
be a parent that doesn't know. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, of course. And what's interesting is that the deeper I get into this, I'm noticing a very strong correlation between people with autism and pandas as like a co-infection, basically. There's a lot of kids out there who are not only suffering with autism, but suffering from these symptoms that I'm describing as a result of encephalitis or brain inflammation. And that's the driver of pandas. It's an unusual autoimmune response that your body has to usually a strep throat infection, but it can be other foreign pathogens as well. We know we see it in Lyme disease. We see it from even just any kind of infection really can drive this unusual autoimmune response in which your body creates antibodies in excess, great excess. And I remember the first time we started to test my blood and look at my strep titers and antibodies, we noticed they were off the charts, measurably high. And it was an indicator that I had been fighting off this strep throat infection for a very long time. I had strep as a kid routinely, but looking back, I probably had it more often than I realized. I was just asymptomatic. So I didn't have the cough or the sore throat or anything like that, but the bacteria was hiding in my body nonetheless. And antibodies are one of the few compounds that can cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning they entered an area of my body where they should not have been hanging out, my basal ganglia, which is the motor cortex of the body. And so as a result, I experienced that inflammation in my brain, and it wreaked havoc on my body physically, mentally, and emotionally. Just dealing with those symptoms on a daily basis and not having any answers is a very tough place to be.
Yeah, wow, that is a lot to deal with. And so if I'm a parent and I just heard of this and I'm like, huh, what do I do if I think maybe, what are we looking for? What do we do?
Yeah, so Pandas is a clinical diagnosis, so it's not something that you can just take a blood test and say, oh, yeah, he or she has got this. It involves finding the right physician who knows what they're looking at, putting together the pieces, looking at your history of infection, looking at your blood work, looking at your symptom load, doing a meta-analysis of all these things and coming to a determination that this is what it is. And for me, that was the game changer because it went from just trying to throw medication at my symptoms and hope something worked to giving me a clear path forward where we could identify, yeah, it's the strep throat bacteria that's causing this reaction. So we can really target that and eliminate the source of infection. The second prong is treating the inflammation. So diet change, supplementation, active lifestyle, all these things that really we should all be doing, but it becomes much more important when you're battling an autoimmune disease. So getting that inflammation down so that my brain can process at a normal high level is key to mitigating your symptoms naturally instead of just relying on the medication.
Yeah, wow. I know you said you had a long list of prescribed medications.
Yeah.
Like, give us a little bit of what that was like.
The first medication they ever gave me, and this was, I was in and out of this doctor's office in what felt like 5 minutes. I got the Tourette syndrome diagnosis. Didn't really tell us much, but he said, "Here, take this medication." It was called clonidine, and it is a blood pressure medication. And of course, 13-year-old me, I was active, relatively healthy. I did not have a blood pressure issue at all, but this medication was known to have off-label use as like reducing tremors and possibly reducing tics. So the physician basically said, here, try this, see if it works. If it doesn't work, bump up the dose and then come back in 6 months. And I did absolutely nothing for me. No results, no side effects, nothing. It was like a sugar pill. So that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because I remember that first visit to that doctor thinking, oh man, this neurology guy is going to get me back on the right path. And that's just not what happened. And it was dozens of doctor visits later that we actually found someone who knew about pandas and what that looked like, who could give me this diagnosis and give us this treatment protocol that kind of kickstarted my healing journey.
Yeah, I know it's so tough when you're trying to find answers and you just have to keep trying, keep trying. It's so exhausting. And I'm sure your parents really had a hard time trying to help you. Like the frustration level as a parent is huge.
Oh yeah, and watching your child suffer and not being able to find any answers, it's and the financial burden of that too, going to all these doctor visits and because Pandas wasn't recognized, most of it was not covered by insurance. So it was a difficult battle. This was about 20 years ago. A lot has changed. Like you said, many people are aware of Pandas now, and I take pride in promoting awareness for this so that it's easier for people to find answers. But yeah, 20 years ago, no one knew what this was. We scoured the internet, we scoured the library for answers, and it's counterintuitive to associate like a bacterial infection with neurological symptoms like this. So it was very difficult to find an answer.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, of course, going through just this horrible pathway of finding the right doctor, and then you finally find the right doctor. And then what was the first thing that he had you do? You said diet. Was that the first thing he had you do?
We did try some other medications first, and I went along with that just because of the expertise of the physician. But I think more than anything, it was the first time I had spoken with someone who actually understood what I was going through in a sense, and it broke down those walls. I mean, after going to so many doctors and trying so many prescriptions, I had physician fatigue. I was sick of doctors. I was
Mhm.
sick of pharmacy, sick of medications, and I just pushed back at that point. This was about 17, 18 years old, and I just said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. Many of the medications I tried made me feel worse. I remember feeling like a zombie and even getting in trouble in class. My math teacher in 10th grade called my parents and said, I think Ethan's on drugs. He's falling asleep at his desk. And I remember responding, I am on drugs.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
medications make me feel terrible. And so that was a big eye opener. And moving forward, I was really looking for like more holistic solutions. A lot of it, the doctor helped me understand what was going on, but a lot of my healing really came down to me deciding to take my health into my own hands. Doctors can prescribe you treatment protocol and medication, but unless you're willing to change, it's going to be a very difficult journey. You get better. Just looking back on my lifestyle, eating the typical American diet, living a more sedentary lifestyle at that age, succumbing to the pressures and stress triggers that were in my life, I didn't have many outlets. And so just going back and looking at my lifestyle, saying, what things can I change? What things can I tweak in my life to have a better life? And it really came down to an anti-inflammatory diet. First of all, I'm not a doctor, so I can't recommend any treatment protocols specifically, but I can say focusing on eliminating processed foods, minimizing sugar, like if you're an adult, minimizing alcohol intake, all of these things that trigger our inflammation and trigger an inflammatory response in our bodies, that's priority number one. If you're dealing with an inflammatory illness like Pandas, getting rid of those processed foods, focusing on consuming anti-inflammatory foods. These foods are the building blocks of our body. They say you are what you eat, but literally your cells are made of what you put in your body. So diet is key. It's the number one thing. And changing my diet had almost an immediate effect on how I felt and how I was able to combat this. The other thing is getting exercise. I got into a weightlifting routine, and for much of my life, I was very underweight. I was like 135 pounds as an 18-year-old, just skin and bones. And those antibodies had nowhere to go because I was so underweight. My functional medicine doctor now, looking back at my blood work and everything, he's describing the 50, 60 pounds of muscle mass I've gained through eating a high protein diet and working out and lifting weights. This muscle mass is a sink for inflammatory compounds. It gives these eosinophils and these antibodies a place to go other than my brain so that they can more or less, it dilutes the effects of these inflammatory compounds on my body. So it has a very powerful physiological result from eating right and exercising and these things again that we all know we should be doing but we often don't prioritize until we hit a health crisis.
That's exactly right, because we don't listen to our bodies typically. And sometimes we just, oh, it's you diagnose yourself with all kinds of things. But you had every red flag, like something was
Yeah.
definitely going on. And thank goodness you found somebody that could say, hey, this is what you have. I am so interested with you have CBD oil. And I want to know, I want to learn from you, is this a legitimate and viable treatment option for kids with neurological differences like autism?
Yeah, so I'll take a step back on that question and give you how I got into CBD because many people think CBD and they think cannabis and that thing, but CBD is actually completely removed from marijuana and cannabis. It's not a marijuana product. In fact, the CBD that I use and recommend is completely THC free, meaning there's no psychoactive properties, there's no risk of intoxication, you won't fail a drug test from take CBD. But the reason I got into CBD was actually around that same time, 17, 18 years old, when I started to have that physician fatigue. I didn't want to take any meds. I was introduced to cannabis. So my friends were smoking and I kind of got into that. I do think that the normalization of substance reliance through all of the pharmaceuticals I had been on throughout my childhood really normalized that idea in my mind. If you find a pill or whatever that works, that's your answer. So I remember the first time I smoked, I just felt this relief. Like my anxiety went away, my tics went away, I felt calm, I felt more normal. And it was like I hadn't experienced that in a decade of dealing with this almost. I just clung to that. That was like my thing. And I come from a very conservative family. My parents did not condone that at all. I got in trouble. Not only my mom busted me, I don't know how many times. But I actually ended up getting in trouble with the law a number of times as well. And it was just really rough trying to use the only thing that worked for me to feel better and then dealing with these other consequences. And then the negative health aspects that come along with that, right? Like long term, inhaling particulate matter in general is hazardous for your health. There's all kinds of issues with consuming marijuana on a regular basis that were not good for me. So I really needed to understand, like, why was this helping me? And is there a better way? And that came when I discovered CBD. I was actually living out in Colorado after graduation and came across this thing called CBD. I said, what is this? I tried it and immediately I had the same results. Like my anxiety melted away. It was like this wave of calm came over me. My tics went away. I felt more normal, but I didn't have to smoke. I didn't have to deal with intoxicating effects. I didn't have to deal with the consistency issues from wherever I was getting my cannabis, right? It was a
Right.
more medicinal health focused approach. And CBD, it gives you all of those same I call it nature's most powerful anti-inflammatory. So it immediately went to work on the inflammation in my brain and in my body without all those negative connotations of cannabis. So when I moved back to Virginia, this was 2015, you couldn't find CBD. It just wasn't, it didn't exist here. And so I quickly realized, oh man, like what do? I need to get my hands on this stuff. So I reached out to some friends in Colorado and they sent me some raw materials, some CBDs, and I started just mixing and formulating different products in the spare bedroom of my house, like different concentrations of oils and topical products and brownies and however I could get it in my body, I was using it to try to get away from this more recreational use. And so pretty soon people started asking me about it. What is this stuff? Is this legal? What are you doing? And I became very outspoken about what I was doing and why I was doing it, having an understanding of how it was helping me and how it was impacting my body. Pretty soon people were like, oh, maybe I should try that. Grandma wanted it for her achy joints in her knees, and grandpa wanted to try it to help him sleep at night, and so forth. And I realized, man, this could help a lot of people other than me. So I started making products on a larger level. I went to a farmer's market here locally and started to sell the products. And fast forward to today, we operate a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility here in Virginia, and we're shipping to all 50 states and internationally, giving people a product that they can trust, that they know, again, there's no THC at all. It's third-party lab tested for purity and potency to make sure there's no contaminants in it. It's something I take every day. My wife relies on our pain relief cream on our back and shoulders to help her sleep at night and relieve some back and neck pain she has. And we're putting it in our bodies on a daily basis. We want to make sure it's safe. And so to answer your question, is this something that's safe for kids? Quite frankly, I wish I had access to this as a 13-year-old. It would have made my life a lot easier. And I will
Yeah.
say CBD has been thoroughly tested for safety. The
Mhm.
supplement industry in general is largely unregulated and it's tough to know what you're getting. So
Yeah.
relying on those third-party lab test results, finding a source that uses organic and quality ingredients in their products is the key. And again, making sure that there's no THC so that there's no unwanted side effects or risks associated with that. Our kids segment is our fastest growing segment in our company. People who are looking for relief for not only pandas, but OCD and ADHD and autism and all kinds of different ailments that are maybe inflammatory driven or anxiety driven that CBD has been clinically shown to help with.
So, do you feel like you no longer have pandas?
So it still impacts me to this day for sure. I still have some inflammatory markers in my blood work, but I like to consider myself 90% healed at this point. Like I have found so many ways to cope and manage with this. And I do think CBD, I would never advertise it as a miracle pill. It's not something where
Right.
you can just take it and all your problems go away. But for me, dealing with this, I needed some kind of relief so that I could just step back and take a deep breath and refocus on these, what can I do to make my life better? Because when you deal with some kind of chronic illness like pandas, like autism, like you're dealing with this day in and day out. Honestly, the last thing you want to do after dealing with these symptoms all day is then go and think about it deeply and focus on it and talk about it. I was completely shut off to talking about this for most of my life, and it just put this burden on my shoulders, like I was dealing with this all alone. That's not a place anyone should be. So using CBD as a natural anti-inflammatory tool to give you some relief so that you can then go back and think, what things do I need to change in my life? What should I be eating? What should I be doing on a daily basis? What are some stress triggers in my life that I could do without and that I can get rid of to have a better life? Sometimes you need a little push and a little help.
Yeah, that is a really great, inspiring story. And for parents who are looking for answers, like you said, even if you're not exactly dealing with autism, there are other aches and pains that we all deal with. Tell us about how we can help ourselves. Tell us about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. It was honestly a grassroots beginning for us, and now our goal is to just help people to live a happier, healthy life. And if you can use CBD as a tool to make things a little bit easier for you, often these lifestyle changes are not as hard to implement as they would be without something. I remember just being physically and mentally stuck in my tics and my symptoms, really sitting back and now reflecting and talking about what I was dealing with was not an option. I was so closed off to having any kind of discussion about this, whether it was my parents or my teachers or even the physicians. I really just put a wall up, and it wasn't helping me at all. And what I found is that being open and honest about my situation not only took the pressure off me and put me in a position where I can actually get the help I need, but it's also positioned me to help others and speak into their lives, talking about the things I've done to help myself physically, mentally, spiritually, and how other people can leverage those same lifestyle changes to improve their quality of life. Oftentimes in today's world, it's very difficult to find that diagnosis. You go to the doctor, you have a broken arm, that's fine. They give you a splint, maybe some pain meds, and out you go, and in a few weeks you're fine. But when you go to the doctor with a more difficult diagnosis, whether it's a neurological disorder or autism, it can be a long journey to figure out what's wrong and to get you a treatment protocol of any kind. So I'm a big proponent of taking your health into your own hands, making these lifestyle changes we've talked about, and finding ways to implement them that is enjoyable and not miserable. I know, like you mentioned, weightlifting, and people cringe, oh, I don't want to get a gym membership. But after a few weeks of creating these habits and these healthy habits in your life, it becomes easier. You're less sore, you're more knowledgeable. Maybe you make friends at the gym. It's something that I personally look forward to throughout my week now, instead of it just being an obligation and something that I have to do for my health. Finding things that you enjoy in life and implementing them, finding foods that are anti-inflammatory and healthy, not candy, not sweets, but things that you enjoy eating that are good for you. It's easier said than done, but if you can do that, it changes your whole perspective of food and how we nourish our bodies. That's why I'm so passionate about these lifestyle changes. And again, finding something like CBD that's safe, non-intoxicating, it doesn't alter your brain chemistry, but it gives you some relief to make these changes easier has been hugely beneficial for me.
Yeah, and I've been weightlifting since I was in my 20s, and it is a game changer, especially as you age too. So I'm a huge
Mhm.
advocate for everything you're saying. And I too have autoimmune issues. And when you get in those, I didn't have pandas, but I'm a type 1 diabetic
Sure.
and also my thyroid, you name it. I continue to work on inflammation based on my autoimmune disease, and I'm a huge advocate for everything that you're saying. And until you're there, it is really hard to understand the frustration and how to get help. And so I, for one, appreciate this conversation so much. And we're not going to leave before we find out where we can find you and all that good stuff. But I do want to ask you, what advice do you have for parents? You're a parent yourself, so what advice do you have?
Yeah, looking back, I don't know, there's so many things we would have done differently. But obviously, finding someone who understands where you're coming from is key, but also listening to your kids. I battled with my parents and with many adults in my life over my use of cannabis because they just thought I had given up. They thought I was going to end up in prison. They thought I was just doing it to escape and party. And the reality is, I was using it as the only tool in my arsenal to feel better. And so, listening to your kids and being honest with them and having those conversations can be so key because while you want to help your kids and you hate to see them doing things that are detrimental to their health, they know what's going on in their bodies, whether they can verbalize it to you or not. And so part of my job today is not only to bring awareness and advocacy to Pandas and helping those people along their journey, but to destigmatize cannabis in general. And again, I do not condone the recreational THC has its benefits, sure, but it's certainly not for everybody and it's certainly not for kids. So finding a tool like CBD that can give you that relief and that push you need to get better and feel better can be so key. And so that's why I say it's not a marijuana product. It's something that can be used safely and effectively. And I can't tell you how many people now are using this for their autism or their kids with autism with just tremendous anecdotal evidence, like just amazing results where similar to my story, nothing else worked and they're seeing great results from using this. And so, especially with autism, with kids who have trouble verbalizing how they're feeling, it's remarkable because you can see the impact it's making on how they feel and how they act from day to day, whether it's giving them the sleep that they need or helping to reduce anxiety and anger issues. Like it worked for me, it works for countless others, so it could work for you, and it's I think it's worth a try.
It is worth a try. It's safe. And you never know. You never know what help it would. I know for myself, I have the cream that you were talking about
Yeah.
for your wife for my aches and pains
Yep.
from that I have myself. And it just works great. I would like to know before we go, how can people find you? How can we get your product?
So my website is greenvalleynutrition.com, and you'll know you're in the right place because the logo up at the top of the screen is a panda. And so again, I went from a place of not wanting to talk about this, I wanted to pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't, to really embodying like panda says who I am and what I stand for. And who doesn't like a cute, cuddly panda bear, right? So greenvalleynutrition.com, it's a wealth of information. I've got a blog on there with personal stuff as well as research that we're doing. We're conducting clinical trials for our product right now just to push the boundaries on what we know about this and how it works. You can sign up for our email list and we send out periodic updates and information about our products, how you can best use them, and so forth. I'm on Instagram as well. I do a good bit on Instagram. It's Ethan_Pandas, and that's more like the personal side of things, airplanes, motorcycles, health and wellness stuff, all the stuff that I love that have been outlets for me in my life and helped me to live better. Just trying to share that with others. And you can just send me a message. It'll go right to me personally. And I interact with people on a daily basis, just again, sharing what I've learned and helping you to point you in the right direction if that's what you need. So feel free to reach out. And it's funny you mentioned you take the cream because I've seen so many people grab a product for their kids, whether it would be the oil drops or the gummies or whatever, and they see the result and the impact it has on their child's life, and they think, oh man, I could use some anxiety relief, or I could use some help with sleeping, and then the parents are taking it too. So it's something that's safe for the whole family and can bring a wealth of benefits if used correctly. Again, encourage you to check it out and ask questions.
Yeah, one of the things that we learn when we have these sorts of journeys that are really difficult ones, you become a lot more open-minded.
Yeah.
And I know for myself, I love learning new things so that I can too offer help to folks that reach out to me. And so I just really appreciate you taking the time, reaching out, and having this conversation with us. And for those of you that are watching, you can tell that I'm probably a lot dimmer in the lighting. Our electricity went out in the middle of our interviews, but we did it. We made it work and we got this information out regardless, didn't we?
That's right. Yeah, sometimes you got to roll with the punches, and it's, yeah, nothing new to me. So,
Me either. Thank you so much, Ethan, for being on A Mother's Guide Through Autism. I hope you'll come back when you get some more research or you want to share anything else. Always welcome here. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you sharing my journey and promoting the awareness for all of this stuff we're talking about. If just one person listens to this and gets a glimpse of hope or some inspiration for what we've been talking about, then it was all worth it.
Absolutely. And this podcast is all about knowledge, hope, and inspiration. So if you enjoyed this episode, we would greatly appreciate you liking our YouTube channel, Mother's Guide Through Autism, and help us help more people. The more we share things, the more people are going to hear this and the more folks we can help. So thank you, and I'll see y'all in the next episode.